The Battle of the Bulge was one of the bloodiest battles fought on the Western Front during the Second World War, and hundreds of thousands of men committed to a surprise attack through the Ardennes forest. The attack was the brainchild of Hitler, who against all advice from his generals was determined to attempt an audacious knockout blow against the Allies. If the West could be forced to make peace, the German Führer reasoned, then the Soviets could also be pushed back and Germany saved from defeat. The operation, codenamed Autumn Mist, was to attack with the 5th and 6th Panzer Armies and the 7th Army, a stretch of the Allied front that was held by parts of Corley Hodges' 1st Army. The Allies had focused divisions for their own attacks and had left the Ardennes lightly defended in order to do so. Spearheaded by elite SS Panzer divisions in 6th Panzer Army, the Germans aimed to smash through the American lines before crossing the River Meuse and sweeping north to capture the port of Antwerp. If successful, the Anglo-Canadian 21st Army Group, in Hitler's mind it was a decisive, audacious attack that the Americans would be unable to react to in time. What Hitler perhaps failed to grasp was that there was a reason the Americans had so easily removed troops from the Ardennes. On at least 6 occasions, Hitler refused any changes to his master plan and insisted the offensive go ahead as he planned, setting December 16th as the Germans prepared their attack. The Allies were focused on their own planned offensives into the Saarland and towards the Ruhr dams. Through the autumn of 1944, the Allies took their eye off the ball, thinking too much only in terms of what they would do to the enemy next and not what the enemy could still do to them. It wasn't until December 7th that the Allies had any idea that an attack might be imminent, and it took another week for Omar Bradley. 16th, Hitler's grand counter-offensive began. 18 divisions in the German front line began their attack, with their immediate objective to seize key road junctions and bridgeheads to allow the 5 Panzer divisions to race towards the Meuse. Opposing the Germans were just 6 American divisions and Combat Command B of the 9th Armoured, holding a 60-mile front line. As grenadiers swarmed across the front line, American communications were hampered by heavy snowstorms, and it was difficult for the local Corps commander Troy Middleton to build up a clear picture of what was going on. This had dire consequences for the 106th Division, which was holding the line near St. Vith. The 106th had only just arrived in Europe, and its inexperience in the poor weather showed. Poor coordination between its regiments and its divisional HQ led to the 18th Volksgrenadier Division managing to encircle 2 regiments on the second day of the attack, with the unit's 29-year-old commander, Joachim Peiper, commanding Kampfgruppe Peiper, demanded they continue to advance through the night to make up the lost time. His determination to allow nothing to delay his formation any further was to have horrific consequences the following day, when men under his command murdered 84 American prisoners of war near Malmedy. The massacre was symptomatic of the callous disregard for human life that the SS bred in its ranks, and word of it quickly spread throughout the Ardennes, stiffening the resolve of American divisions to stand and fight. The Germans were just managing to bring the bulk of their tanks into action, following difficulties bridging the River Ruhr. Lagging behind schedule, it was now vitally important that they take control of the Ardennes' few decent roads, and so the town of Bastogne, at the centre of a number of important routes, became a key objective. Both of 5th Army's closest panzer divisions, 2nd Panzer and the Panzer Lehr Division, pushed towards it, shattering the US 28th Division that stood in their way. With the 106th also crippled and its remnants forced back to St. Vith, the centre of the Allied line had now collapsed, threatening the entire Ardennes front. Understanding how severe the situation was for lack of progress, Hitler now tore up his own plan. He ordered 5th Army's panzers to abandon their attempts to take Bastogne and just dash to the Meuse as quickly as possible. Behind them, the 26th Volksgrenadier and 5th Parachute Divisions would encircle the town, under the command of Heinrich Luttwitz. Eager to do anything that might accelerate the advance, Luttwitz tried to bluff the Americans into surrendering the town, sending a letter that exaggerated the strength of German troops outside Bastogne and threatened destruction and annihilation if they did not comply. He demanded that the 101st commander, Anthony McAuliffe, surrender the town. McAuliffe's response was to generate international headlines. Writing back to the German commander, he replied simply, "Nuts." It was a deeply embarrassing rejection for Luttwitz and yet another. Elsewhere in the Ardennes, things were no better for the Germans. As the Allies poured in reinforcements, progress slowed across the entire front. The town of St. Vith was bolstered by 7th Armoured Division and held out until December 21st, denying the Germans another town crucial to control the road network for days on end. Even less progress was made in the north, where the terrain was dramatically worse and Hitler had foolishly ordered the main effort of the advance to take place. After several days of heavy fighting in the vicinity of the Elsenborn Ridge, 12th SS Panzer Division was forced to retreat and move further south. Kampfgruppe Peiper meanwhile stalled west of La Gliese, as the division was blocked by the 82nd Airborne Division arriving from the west. Within a few days, Peiper's force would be forced into retreat from his overextended position in the first successful Allied counterattack of the Bulge. And so it was that 5th Army's central sector saw the greatest success. Joining 2nd Panzer and the Panzerlehr Division was the 116th Panzer Division, which on December 21st had reached the River Ourthe at Hotten, where a small detachment of American troops was managing to hold off their initial attacks. The delay proved to be fateful, as it gave time for the US 3rd Armoured and 84th Divisions to arrive on the opposite bank and block the path west. The two Panzer Divisions emerging from Bastogne had better luck. By December 23rd, Panzerlehr was preparing to assault Rochefort, and 2nd Panzer had its advanced units near Celle, just 5 miles from the Meuse crossing at Dinant. It looked likely now that the Meuse could be reached and crossed, although both divisions were exposed without infantry support and were having to deploy much of their strength to protect their flanks, which blunted their spearhead. That day, as both divisions prepared to resume their advance, the weather turned. The low cloud and fog which had shrouded the German offensive lifted and gave way to a bright, clear day. Perfect flying weather. Hundreds of Allied bombers took to the sky and pummeled German logistics. Supplies to the tanks of desperately needed fuel collapsed. The 116th Division was rendered essentially paralysed around Hotten and was forced to go onto the defensive, while 2nd Panzer remained static at Celle. After a day of struggle, Panzerlehr did manage the morning of Christmas Eve, but it was all too little, too late. With each passing day, Allied strength grew and the German chances of success receded. By Christmas Day, it was clear. 5th Panzer armies raced to them. The Germans would continue to attack vainly around Bastogne for several days more, but they would have no success doing so. Over the coming weeks, the Allies would launch a series of counterattacks designed to flatten and push back the Bulge, and make steady progress doing so. Plunging winter temperatures and vicious German resistance made reclaiming the Ardennes an excruciating task, but it was a matter of time until even Hitler was forced to accept. On January the 9th, he ordered the withdrawal of the 1st and 2nd SS Panzer Corps in an effective admission of defeat. 2 weeks later, the last German units were withdrawn across the frontier they had crossed on December 16, ending the Bulge and the battle